So, I want to preface this review by saying that I really liked the original Hellblade. It was beautiful, haunting, and a visually unique passion project for Ninja Theory. And what I respect about it a lot is that they even took the risk of self-publishing it to ensure no big, disgusting AAA publisher would meddle in their vision of depicting mental illness with respect and unflinching intensity. I also want to say that I really like Ninja Theory as a studio. Ever since they made Heavenly Sword, they haven't exactly had the easiest time finding success, despite some of their games being really good. And because of this, I've always been rooting for them. And while I had some concerns about them being swallowed up by Xbox, I was looking forward to seeing what they could do now that they had unrestricted creative autonomy and access to Microsoft's war chest. So, with all that said, it brings me no pleasure to say that I think Hellblade 2 is one of the worst games I've played in quite some time. It's one of the most disappointing games I've ever played in this channel's history, and it's one of the worst sequels I've ever played too. It is such a shocking setback in quality in nearly every facet compared to the first game. And even for a mere 6-hour playthrough, it was a fucking slog to get through most of the time. Multiple times during my playthrough, I kept wondering out loud things like, what the hell happened to Ninja Theory? How did this happen? Why did this happen? Why was this game even made? And what's even funnier is that at the beginning of the year, I made a prediction that Hellblade 2 would be Xbox's best game so far this generation, and that I would find it to be at bare minimum very good because of my trust in Ninja Theory. And boy was I wrong. Did I misread the tea leaves on that one, guys? Unfortunately, it is everything that I was afraid it was going to be, and much worse. I mean, all the concerns and caveats that I had about this game were dead on. And to be honest, by the end of my playthrough of it, I kind of hated it. I grew to resent this game on multiple levels. And so, first things first, I want to tackle what I think is the single most irritating talking point of this game. The graphics. Yes, the damn game has really amazing facial capture tech and quasi-realistic looking lighting and nature effects. But you know what? Who fucking cares? No, I'm serious. Who the fuck cares? I certainly don't when these realistic graphics are tied to a game this boring and simplistic and up its own ass. And to go a step further, I think the original Hellblade's visual style and atmosphere were far more interesting and memorable than Hellblade 2's foolhardy and boring obsession with realism and, quote, cinematic, unquote, presentation. Because Ninja Theory were on a tight budget with the first game, they had to get creative with certain visual elements, such as blending in filtered live-action footage to depict Senua's mentor, and using a POV shot for Dillian's scenes. And these were all done because Ninja Theory was on a very limited budget. So, because of these creative decisions, they didn't have to spend precious time and money on animating NPCs. And you know what? It unintentionally worked in the game's favor because it created a unique visual style and vibe. There is nothing like that in Hellblade 2. Now that they have unlimited resources and access to the latest fancy Unreal Engine 5 tech. I mean, it's almost like this is what's really baffling to me, is that it's almost like Ninja Theory fundamentally misunderstood what made the first game so good. And it was never about hyper-realistic graphics. I want to make that very clear. Never was about that. And that's why this overwhelming focus on the fancy graphics from both Ninja Theory and games media personalities is so irritating. I mean, was I impressed with the graphics? Sure, at times I was. I mean, the facial animations can be very impressive, especially for Senua. And there are certain sequences that are visually pleasing to look at. But at the end of the day, that almost doesn't matter when the experience itself is just so ungodly boring. And another thing too is that I could not stop thinking about the limitations and compromises that need to be made to get the game to look like this. I mean, just with the visual image itself, the quality is that they have to use the stupid letterbox format to get it to where they aren't rendering as many assets as they could. They use a lot of post-processing effects, especially during the cutscenes, that kind of give the image a very like weird, blurry, washed out look to it. It's very strange, just some of the abundance of post-processing effects that they had to use to make the game look realistic in cutscenes. And they certainly couldn't push the boat out on gameplay or set pieces because it might have just been too technically demanding for the Xbox Series X and S. So what we're stuck with is a very pretty walking simulator, because that's all they could, I guess, afford to do this time around. And you know what? I didn't even think the little set pieces that they had this time around were all that effective. I mean, all you're really doing during these set pieces is just holding the analog stick while you're just moving through a linear path, a very linear path, or you're just running from point A to point B to point C to point D, and you're not really doing anything all that intensive. So, and the horror elements that were so effective the first time around just don't really hit at all for me in Hellblade 2. It's almost like I've seen it all before at this point. You have the sequence where there's the piles of dead bodies. Check. You have the sequence where you're crawling under something and somebody is getting stabbed or killed above you and their blood drips through the floorboards onto you. Check. You have that. You have the scene where you witness somebody being sacrificed. Check. You have that. And it's almost like tropey at this point, which is really disappointing for a team like Ninja Theory, who I think are normally so creative with their visuals. And another thing too that I thought was so good about the first game that I think just is ruined in this game is parts of the sound design, and I'm not talking about things like music, good. Atmospheric sounds, good. My biggest issue with the audio design is the voices. And what I mean by that is that if you haven't played the original Hellblade or this one, they use binaural audio to simulate these voices in Senua's head that are kind of like floating around you, and they move from various ear to ear, and you can hear them above, you can hear them below, and it made for a really cool trick in the first game. But they dramatically changed how the voices function in Hellblade 2, where instead of just being a part of the sound design, now it's almost like they're an element of the UI. Like the voices are there to tell you what to do, and they're there to provide non-stop exposition because the story is so bare bones. And the worst offender is that during combat, they don't stop repeating the same lines over and over and over and over again. During combat, what little combat there is in this game, you're gonna hear things like, he knows your moves. Make it more unpredictable. Oh, he's weak. Finish him. Oh, you're weak. You can't do this. You're gonna hear those three things repeatedly during the fight. There was one fight in particular where I kept hearing, oh, he can read your moves. 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 It's like, shut up. Shut the fuck up. This is so annoying. And it was not like this in the first game. I mean, yes, they talked during combat, but it was things that were helpful because the combat was shockingly a little more robust in the first game compared to this one, which that's my next thing. So what is the gameplay like in this game? Because I called it a walking simulator earlier. I am not exaggerating when I say that roughly 75% of what you're going to be doing in Hellblade 2 is walking. I am not making that up. I shit you all not. Most of the game was me holding the left analog stick with my thumb in whatever direction the game wanted me to go, and holding the left bumper to make Senua go from slowly walking to lightly jogging. There was a point, especially near the end of the game, where I had my thumb on the analog stick and I had my finger on the left bumper, and I looked away from the screen and I looked down at the controller and what I was doing, and I just thought to myself, wow, this is the gameplay. It's just walking. It's a walking simulator. I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe, and yes, there was quite a bit of walking in the first game, but not like this. It's almost like they went out of their way to take out more gameplay elements just to have more walking. I was just speechless. And the rest of the time, you're going to be doing things like puzzles and occasionally fighting. And as I mentioned earlier, what's fucking wild is that the combat and puzzles, if you can believe it, are even more simplistic and one note compared to the first game. And they were one note and simplistic back then in 2017. Ninja Theory straight up lied. They straight up lied when they said that they reworked the combat to be even more robust and dynamic. That is a fucking lie. Where did they rework it? Where did they rework it? I mean, they might have put in more, different combat animations to do more motion capture, but that's it. As far as actually like functionally what you're going to be doing in combat, it's even less compared to the first game. It also feels even clunkier compared to the first game. Because most of the combat now in the original game, they had things like where you could fight multiple enemies at once, which is where the voices came in, were helpful because they would tell you when an enemy was going to attack you from behind and you had to quickly turn around and block or get out of the way or dodge roll or whatever. And then they had actual boss fights in the first game. Nope. Nah. All the combat is in this game is 1v1. And just the amount of stupid fucking hyperbole I've heard from Ninja Theory and some content creators say like, oh, this combat is so intense. And I feel like I'm barely scraping by on the edge of my teeth. That's a lie. That's so stupid and so exaggerated. Like what are you talking about? Like, this ain't fucking Resident Evil or some shit. This ain't some fucking survival horror game. It's a very linear 1v1 scripted interaction with enemies that are like, there are segments of this game where you'll fight like 8 enemies in a row and almost all of them feel exactly the same because the enemy variety is next to non-existent in this game. You fight a guy with a sword, you fight a guy with an axe, and you fight a guy that spits fire. That's it. That's literally all you get. Oh, you get maybe one guy with a spear or a shield in the whole 6-hour experience. Wow. Okay, so puzzles. Let's talk about puzzles. The puzzles mainly consist of the rune puzzles that make an unwelcome return from the first game, and this new kind of puzzle where you focus on a floating bubble that changes parts of the environment. Oh, and you light a torch occasionally that will change the environment. Hooray. And as far as anything else, they're collectibles. I mean, there's lore ruins like the first game. But it's like whenever you find one, you can't walk away from it and continue the game. You have to like stand there and listen to the story that Senua's mentor tells you. There's also what I thought was kind of cool, I guess. Doesn't really do anything, but you can find faces in certain rock formations, and if you focus in on them, they go away and they find a secret little area, and then you just stare at a tree. Stare at a little tree that grows some leaves, and you just hear some exposition, some more exposition. If the abundance of exposition from the voices wasn't enough during the main game, now you can go collect more off the beaten path in certain bits, I guess. And look, I know people say that the first game had simplistic combat and they couldn't get into it because of that. And that's fair, but I was a lot more forgiving and understanding of the simplistic gameplay in the original Hellblade because of the budget limitations and Ninja Theory's clear prioritization of creating an oppressive atmosphere. The visuals is what they wanted to focus on. It's what they wanted to do. And if that meant sacrificing some robust gameplay, I was okay with it for the most part because I thought the atmosphere and the story and the set pieces were much more compelling in that first game. But there is no excuse this time around. There's no excuse. No, come on. I'm sorry. No. Speaking of the story, I thought the story was just so much worse in this game compared to the first one. And I think part of the problem, or actually, if I think about it, the majority of the problem stems from is that it's way less personal this time around. And it focuses much more on external circumstances in the world that I just didn't find interesting at all. Senua travels to Iceland to find some slavers that are getting her people, but she has to end up fighting these giants instead that never is really clearly explained if it's something that other people can actually see or if it's in Senua's head, which they make... Here's the thing. This is going to sound contradictory, but they make a very clear line in the sand in the first game that what we're seeing may or may not be going on. They tell you straight up, it's like, look, this might be happening, but more than likely this is all going on in Senua's head. And that worked back then because, you know, Senua was alone. It was a very isolated experience. But because now there are NPCs around her this time around and characters that I quite frankly couldn't give less of a shit about, it's like it becomes muddled in that, like, well, can these people see what we're doing too? Can they see the weird shit that's happening? Can they see the giants? It creates this muddled thematic thing that I just went, okay, well, I don't really care. I never really cared in the beginning, but now, like, when you're confusing me, now I don't care. And they never really establish it one way or another right up until the game's very weird and very abrupt ending. And you know what this game's story reminded me of? And this is going to be a comparison to PlayStation, is that it reminded me a lot of Horizon Forbidden West, where the first Horizon game, Zero Dawn, was a much more personal story for Aloy. It was all about finding out where she came from, who she was, why was she shunned by everybody in the group, and I really got into learning more about Aloy and her whole backstory. And that's why I think the first game is just so much more compelling on that front than Forbidden West, which Forbidden West I think is a good game, but it's lacking that something in the story because it's focused much more on external circumstances that are way less interesting. And it's the same thing with Hellblade 2, because now that we know, it felt like we got some kind of personal resolution to Senua's story in that first game. And now it's just like, oh, well, I guess go fight some giants. And then when they do try to bring up a more personal element, it just doesn't feel organic. It feels very crowbarred in, like, oh, why is this a problem now? I didn't get it at all, and it just left me feeling so cold and disinterested and disappointed, and And the pacing, my God, is the pacing just fucking dreadful in this game. And even at 6 hours, it felt like it was way too long. And the length is not the problem. I have no problem with this game, in theory, being a 5.5 hour to 6 hour experience. If it's great, it's not. It's just boring. Sequences go on for way too long. There's way too much walking, way too much, just like, oh, look at our pretty environments. Look at Senua's face. Look at all this stuff that we made for you in Unreal Engine 5. And it's just this very self-aware, showy presentation that I just did not click with at all. And I want to hone in on one level in particular. And for those who played Hellblade 2, have played it already, I think you'll know exactly the level that I'm going to bring up. It's what I like to call the cave level. And what this level consists of is wandering around in a cave, long cutscenes, picking up rocks and putting them in holes, lighting torches, fighting a group of enemies maybe 2 or 3 times, and focusing on bubbles. And you're going to be doing this for over an hour in this level. And this is the point in the game that almost broke my patience. I'm not going to lie. I almost quit because of this level. This insanely long, boring ass fucking level is everything wrong with this game. I can't believe anyone at Ninja Theory looked at this level and repeatedly played through it and thought to themselves, yep, this is engaging. No. Picking up rocks, putting them in holes, wandering around in a cave, lighting torches, focusing on bubbles. That's mostly what you're going to be doing for over an hour. And it's so up its own ass because it thinks what it's doing in this level is something deep and meaningful, and it's not. It's just boring. And there are multiple points in this particular level that had me laughing out loud. I was laughing in a game that is meant to be so serious and like, oh, look at how we're presenting mental health, and it's so serious. I was laughing. And with the part that made me laugh, like, there were 2 parts in particular that made me laugh. There was one section where the first bit where you have to pick up a rock and put it in a hole, and the voices in Senua's head start going like, yay! You picked up a rock. Wow, Senua, you're so special. You're the chosen one because you picked up a rock and put it in a hole. Like, what? What? Are you serious? And there's a whole sequence at the end of this long-ass cave level, whatever, where you point at bubbles, you focus on bubbles, and this comically overdone music starts reaching its crescendo, and the voices start congratulating you on knowing how to hold the right trigger to focus on bubbles. On bubbles! This is what we're doing now in this game. What the fuck is this, guys? What is this? The first game did cool shit, like giving the player paranoia over a fake-out permadeath mechanic. It had a set piece where you were running away from a fire and you had to quickly solve puzzles so you wouldn't get fucking burned alive. It had boss fights. What does Hellblade 2 do? Oh, it congratulates me on doing the easiest puzzles in human existence, like you're some special flower child. It's so patronizing. It's so patronizing. Why in this so-called serious game about mental illness am I being treated like a toddler? What is going on? What are we doing, guys? Come on. Yay, you picked up a rock and you put it in a hole. Oh, congratulations, Senua. Oh, you're so special. Oh, you looked at a bubble. You looked at a bubble. That's what we're doing now. Oh, it's like oh. I've played children's games that have harder puzzles than Hellblade 2, and they didn't patronize me as much as this. Like, come on. Why? What are we doing, guys? Come on. Oh, man. And you know, at the end of the day, with all this, it just brings me to one final question. It's like, why did this sequel need to be made? Why? What, other than brand recognition, what was Ninja Theory's aim with this sequel? Because I don't get it. This game's existence confuses me. I understood it with the first game because they wanted to do a very, personal passion project about mental illness and psychosis, and they consulted with a lot of people, and they were very respectful of it, and I got it. You might have had problems with the first game, but you could at least see what the point of it was. What's the point of Hellblade 2 other than to flex your tech muscles with the Unreal Engine 5 and to, I don't know, talk about how Senua is special now? I guess there was some interview that was done years back about this game with one of the studio heads where they were asked, what is the theme of this game? And the theme was, it's about religion and how it kind of like blends with, Senua's mental illness and shit. It's like, what? What the fuck? Where is that? Where in Hellblade 2 is that? Religion? Where is that? I don't know why this game exists, other than brand recognition and to flex your tech muscles, which makes me almost resent the game all the more, because it almost dilutes the impact of the first game. Because I really liked the first game as like a one and done experience, and I felt like I got everything I need to get out of the first game. I didn't need a second one. I was curious to see what they would do with a second one. As it turns out, they just did nothing other than blow smoke up their own ass in regards to, look at our fancy tech. Look at our fancy eye physics and look at Senua's teeth. It's the most realistic teeth you've ever seen. No, come on. And I it should be obvious at this point, but do I recommend Hellblade 2? Absolutely fucking not. I cannot in good conscience recommend this game to anyone. Even on Game Pass, I can't recommend it. Because there are so many games on Game Pass that are far better and far more valuable uses of your time. This game is just a waste of time. It's a waste of 6 hours of your life. And to charge even $50, even at a non-$70 price for this game, is just insulting. It's $50 for an Unreal Engine tech demo that all you do 75% of the time is just walk through it. I don't even think I'd recommend this for like 20 or 30, because there are better walking simulators than Hellblade 2. Go play What Remains of Edith Finch. That's borderline a walking simulator, and yet that has way more gameplay variety and thematic depth than anything in Hellblade 2. Go play Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. Walking simulator. Still better. Go play Open Roads, which is what I talked about earlier this year. That's on Game Pass. That's a better walking simulator, a better interactive drama than Hellblade 2. Because walking around and looking at shit actually has some kind of thematic significance. $50 to walk around, pick up rocks, and stare at bubbles. And you occasionally fight a guy that you just beat by like a block, hit, auto QTE, finish, kill, rinse and repeat. How compelling. And I cannot express how disappointed I am in this game and what Ninja Theory the route that Ninja Theory decided to go with it. It's soul crushing. It really is one of the most disappointing things I have ever played on the channel, to the point where I couldn't believe what I was playing was real. I almost thought to myself, wow, this is all a bad dream. I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and I'm gonna realize, oh, thank God, I had a bad dream where I played Hellblade 2 and it was a boring piece of shit. Now I'm gonna play the real Hellblade 2, not this dream version of it that unfortunately is really what we ended up getting. And I know I'm in the minority on this. I know a lot of people are saying it's like, oh, it's good. Oh, it's great. Whatever. I'm sorry. I'm not going to cut Ninja Theory any more slack. I don't care how many pretty Unreal Engine 5 graphics and lighting and physics they can do in this game. I don't care. I don't care in a game this boring, this patronizing, this just badly paced. Go play the first one. Go play the first Hellblade. If you've never played Hellblade, skip the sequel. Don't even bother with it. Just go play the first one and forget the 2 exists. Yeah, and you know what? The obvious comparison, one final note, the obvious comparison that people are going to make with this game is the Order 1886. They're going to say things like, this is the Xbox version of the Order 1886. I'm here to say that as somebody that does not like the Order 1886 at all, the Order 1886 is better than Hellblade 2. Because at least it's got some fucking gameplay in it. It's not good, but it's there. And it's a far sight a little bit more compelling than what we get in Hellblade 2. So yeah. Disappointing. Very, very disappointing.